Observational studies have identified that regular coffee consumption is associated with a lower risk of liver and endometrial cancer. There are also indications, still under investigation, of a possible protective association with colorectal cancer. Why does this happen? Coffee is one of the greatest sources of antioxidants in the Western diet. It contains anti-inflammatory compounds that, when regularly absorbed by the body, create a cellular environment less favorable to the development of oncological processes. This does not mean that coffee is a treatment. It does not mean you should drink 10 cups a day thinking you are protecting yourself. It means that coffee, consumed consciously, is not the villain you were led to believe and can, in certain contexts, play a favorable role in your health. Tell me in the comments, have you ever stopped drinking coffee out of fear that it was harmful? What city are you responding from? The problem is not the coffee, the problem is the temperature. The International Agency for Research on Cancer, the IARC, the same body that classifies substances by their carcinogenic potential, identified that beverages consumed above approximately 65 degrees Celsius are associated with an increased risk of esophageal cancer. It is not the coffee, it is the heat. Any beverage consumed systematically above that temperature threshold causes repeated microinjuries to the esophageal mucosa. These microinjuries, when they occur chronically over years, create a persistent inflammatory process in the esophageal tissue. And chronic inflammation in any tissue of the body is the environment where cellular mutations find fertile ground to develop. This applies to coffee, it applies to tea, it applies to any liquid consumed at elevated temperature. The man who drinks 3 cups of boiling coffee a day, every day, for 20 years, is not being harmed by the coffee. He is being harmed by the habit of consuming liquid at a temperature that esophageal tissue was not designed to withstand repeatedly. The solution is not to give up coffee. It is simple. Wait. Let it cool down a little before drinking. That single adjustment completely eliminates the risk factor that science has identified in relation to coffee and cancer. And here is something that almost nobody talks about. Cultures that historically consume very hot beverages, hot tea in certain regions of Asia and Turkish coffee served at high temperatures, show higher rates of esophageal cancer than populations that consume the same beverages at more moderate temperatures. It is not the beverage, it is the temperature, it is the habit, it is what you do with it. Now, the third point, and this one is important because there is a very common confusion between the different effects of excessive coffee consumption. Excessive coffee consumption can cause anxiety, insomnia, and elevated blood pressure. This is real. This has scientific support. And these effects have a direct impact on your health and well-being, but they are not directly linked to the development of cancer. This distinction matters because many people mix up the harmful effects. They hear that too much coffee is bad, which is true, and automatically associate that harm with oncological risk, which has no solid evidence. Excess caffeine affects the central nervous system. It affects sleep quality. And sleep quality does have a relationship with immunological health and with the body's ability to maintain the cellular surveillance that prevents the development of serious conditions. But that is a long and indirect chain, very different from saying that coffee causes cancer. What science clearly points out is this: coffee in moderate amounts, somewhere between 1 and 4 cups a day for most adults, does not represent oncological risk. On the contrary, it may offer benefits through its antioxidant and anti-inflammatory load. Excess, as happens with any substance, creates other problems. Real problems. But different problems from those that were associated with coffee for decades without adequate evidence. Tell me in the comments, how many cups of coffee do you drink per day? And do you drink it hot, warm, or cold? I want to understand the habits of those who are here. Coffee is one of the most studied foods in the history of nutrition and oncological research, and what decades of accumulated science show us is that the simplistic narrative that coffee is harmful was wrong. Not completely wrong, because temperature matters, and that is real. But the idea that coffee itself is a carcinogenic agent does not hold up in the current data. What I want you to take from this video is not a license to drink coffee without limit. It is a more precise way of understanding what truly represents a risk to your health and what is noise, outdated information that kept circulating because nobody stopped to question it. Conscious health decisions depend on quality information, and quality information requires that we be willing to revise what we learned when the data points in another direction. I am over 90 years old. I have drunk coffee my entire life, always warm, always paying attention to what my body was responding to. And I learned that the problem is never the food in isolation. It is the set of habits, the way of consumption, and the consistency with which you apply real information to your routine. Now go to the comments and tell me, did this video change anything about the way you see coffee? And what city and state are you watching from? That information helps me continue creating content that makes sense for your reality. If this video was useful to you, share it with someone who still carries that unnecessary guilt every morning in front of their cup. The information that sets health free rarely arrives through the channels we expect. It arrives in conversations like this one.